The crisis in the Persian Gulf is a result of the unprovoked aggression of the United States and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. At the same time, there is an expanding war in Lebanon. If we look at the geographical map, we can see that the number of Palestinian states is decreasing. Israel has officially announced that there will never be such a state. This will not be accepted by our region.
A Putin ally has delivered a sharp warning shot at Bibi's broader regional vision, with Sergei Lavrov signaling that Moscow will not accept moves that erase or sideline Palestinian statehood. Lavrov has made clear that Russia will not accept efforts to treat all of historic Palestine as Israel's uncontested claim, and he has tied regional stability to the creation of a Palestinian state. Russia has also slammed the United States and Israel over their actions against Iran, and at the CSTO Parliamentary Assembly it backed diplomacy while voicing concern over strikes on Iranian territory.
Thank you, dear Vyacheslav Viktorovich, distinguished participants in this meeting. As you know, on January 1st this year Russia assumed the chairmanship of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Our chairmanship is being conducted under the motto, Collective Security in a Multipolar World, a common goal, a shared responsibility. Together with our allies within the CSTO, we are stepping up efforts to uphold common approaches to addressing international security challenges. Much has already been said about this today. I would like to emphasize that the CSTO's founding documents are based on the principles of peaceful coexistence among states, the priority of political and diplomatic methods of settlement, and strict observance of international law, with the United Nations playing the central role. I believe it is fundamentally important that at the present stage, when the West is increasingly resorting to the illegitimate use of force, open diktat, and outright plunder, CSTO countries do not alter or revise the principles that define the purpose of our organization. We will not abandon the universal norms of international law. On the contrary, we will resist attempts to undermine them and impose lawlessness on world affairs. By defending the universal norms of international law, above all the sovereign equality of states as enshrined in the UN Charter, I am convinced that we are preserving moral leadership in international affairs. Such moral leadership has always been in demand, and when the current period we are witnessing comes to an end, it will be needed more than ever. It is on this basis that we offer partnership to others, including on the principle of the sovereign equality of states, a principle the West has never genuinely respected in any diplomatic, military, or crisis situation. On this basis, we will actively participate together in shaping the future architecture of equal and indivisible security in Eurasia. We see the CSTO as one of the structures that could become a driving force behind such a security architecture. The CSTO was created as an authoritative alliance of states and allies. Its activities are directed against no one. It is not based on aggressive ambitions. It is built solely in the interests of maintaining regional stability and ensuring the well-being of the states that belong to our organization. The constructive nature of our organization is confirmed by the experience we have accumulated since the CSTO was established. We actively engaged in dialogue with our Western counterparts. The CSTO advocated dialogue with NATO. It proposed launching, under the OSCE's broad Euro-Atlantic framework, a working process aimed at strengthening confidence, transparency, and related measures. The CSTO also welcomed the UN Secretary-General's decision to hold regular meetings among military political organizations. However, even then NATO's attitude toward the CSTO was extremely arrogant. There was no question of treating the leaders of the North Atlantic Alliance and all its members as equals. Therefore, when we reaffirm our openness to international contacts, we must of course take into account the lessons of the recent past. Within the CSTO, all decisions are made by consensus. These are not just words. This is genuinely a process aimed at finding a balance of interests and based on mutual respect, good neighborliness, true friendship, and mutual assistance. There is no rigid block discipline here of the kind we see in NATO. I think all of you can confirm that. Incidentally, this same block discipline has now spread to the European Union, where the Brussels bureaucracy is trying to force the governments elected by European nations into actions that do not fit within the agreed norms governing the EU itself. Russia remains committed to continuity in developing the main areas of cooperation within the CSTO. We are continuing the implementation of initiatives put forward by the previous chair, the Kyrgyz Republic. And of course, as many colleagues have said today, our common goal is to preserve and defend the truth about the shared struggle to liberate the world from Nazism and about the immortal feat of a Soviet people who defended their homeland's independence and liberated Europe and the world from a brown plague. On April 19th, Russia marked the day of remembrance of the victims of the genocide of the Soviet people committed by the Nazis and their accomplices during the Great Patriotic War of 1941 to 1945. Of course, we must do everything necessary to ensure that young people understand their history, the history of their ancestors, and are raised in a spirit of deep respect for those who fought at the front and those who secured victory on the home front. Our countries made a tremendous contribution to these common tasks. This year, the international community marks the 80th anniversary of the completion of the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal, which convicted many of the principal Nazi war criminals and legally affirmed the defeat of fascism. The significance of the Nuremberg Tribunal is difficult to overstate. That historic judgment not only convicted the criminals of the Third Reich, but also condemned the very ideology of Nazism. Unfortunately, today this ideology, as well as Nazi practices, is being revived, including in Germany, as well as in those countries that joined Hitler's forces during the attack on the Soviet Union. We see this in Finland as well, not to mention Ukraine, which for decades has been used as a tool for waging war against our state. I should also mention attempts to revive Nazism in Britain, which has long been a cradle of the philosophy of racial superiority. We must certainly preserve the memory of the victims of the genocide of the Soviet people and of every nation of the Soviet Union. We must do everything possible to ensure that these commemorative dates do not become mere formalities. We are convinced that defending our position and our common position on the need to punish those responsible for the genocide of the peoples of the Soviet Union must be an ongoing effort. I would like to express gratitude to our colleagues in the Ministry of Defense, other law enforcement agencies, and the diplomatic service. We recently met with many of them at the Council of Foreign Ministers and agreed that our embassies and consular institutions should continue improving coordination abroad, first and foremost in European countries and in other states that took part in the Second World War. This work is being carried out on the basis of facts. More and more such facts are emerging. Our historians and public figures are doing a great deal of research, creating an additional foundation for our efforts, and increasing the effectiveness of our diplomacy. We are working to ensure that justice prevails. Therefore, we will continue developing contacts across Eurasia and beyond. We need security here in this geopolitical space and in the integration of our common region. At the same time, those who closely follow developments can see that the number of threats in Eurasia is growing. This requires additional efforts on our part. Those who are trying to dominate the world today by unleashing wars and destroying civilians in order to intimidate entire nations are creating new threats to our countries and to our common space. Instability around Afghanistan has already been mentioned today. There is an intense struggle against manifestations of terrorism and against drug trafficking. All this requires additional attention from us. At the same time, the crisis in the Persian Gulf is the result of unprovoked aggression by the United States and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. At the same time, war is expanding in Lebanon and military action against the Syrian Arab Republic is aimed at yet another attempt to divide that state. There is complete stagnation, which is deepening the tragedy of the Palestinian people in Gaza and on the west bank of the Jordan River. If we look at the map, we can see that the space for a Palestinian state is shrinking. Israel has officially declared that such a state will never exist. Instead, there will only be the state of Israel within expanded borders. This will not be accepted in our region. I have just returned from the diplomatic forum in Antalya. President Erdogan and other participants voiced serious concern not only about the consequences of the crisis in the Persian Gulf for the Arabian Peninsula, but also for the Caspian region, the South Caucasus, and Central Asia. These regions are closely interconnected, and instability is spreading from one area to another. There is no doubt that one of the main goals of those who seek to maintain this chaos is to deepen divisions within the Islamic world. This is absolutely obvious, and our organization, together with a significant number of our Muslim partners, should bear this in mind in its practical projects and programs. In the Western direction, we see a steady buildup of forces for yet another attempt to defeat the Russian Federation. Belarus is also being mentioned in this context. President Lukashenko recently spoke about this in one of his interviews. They are not deterred by the fact that we are witnessing a crisis within NATO. Voices are growing louder in favor of forming a new bloc consisting of the EU, the United Kingdom, Norway, and Ukraine. President Zelensky has said he is ready to lead this new military machine and prepare Europe for another war against the Russian Federation and against our country, just as happened in the First World War, under Napoleon, and under Hitler. These forces are uniting. If the actions of President Zelensky and the EU leadership are presented as a defense of European values, that means they want to unite European armies under Nazi banners. Nazism has become an active element of Zelensky's ideology and practice. The Russian language has been banned in all spheres. The canonical Orthodox Church is being persecuted. I believe we must pay attention to such things, including in our military planning, because the crises we see around the CSTO area of responsibility must not be allowed to become a source of real hostilities that would harm us. We must take preventive measures and do everything necessary to strengthen the CSTO's military component. I believe this is our sacred duty. We should work with our closest neighbors and partners, including the CIS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The SCO and the CIS, and especially the CSTO, already have serious programs devoted to stability and security. Recently, the three Secretaries General approved a roadmap for holding joint conferences on security issues in Central Asia and Afghanistan. I think life itself will show us what additional aspects of geographic security may become relevant. Kyrgyzstan currently chairs the CSTO. This creates a very good opportunity for continuity in contacts and for the development of cooperation. Of course, we are interested in expanding the horizons of cooperation with friendly countries, including through observer and partner formats, including with Serbia. I think it is very important that these ties be preserved and strengthened. Serbia, too, is on the front line of the struggle for national independence. It faces direct pressure from Brussels bureaucrats to adopt an anti-Russian line or send its troops into the very bloc they are threatening to form against our country. We support the development of the CSTO's network of auxiliary and consultative mechanisms in key areas of cooperation. One idea I would like to propose is the creation of an association of analytical centers from CSTO member states focused on international relations and security. It seems to me that such a format would fit naturally into our work to strengthen all dimensions of allied cooperation. As I have already said, this includes developing the CSTO's power component, enhancing its military potential, and improving its stock of modern, interoperable weapons and equipment, all in line with current and future challenges, and taking into account the experience of modern armed conflicts. We can see how our Western counterparts are trying to compete with this and promote their own products, which would hardly be compatible with the CSTO's main armament systems. Their goal is obvious. The goal is not to help, but to introduce division and dependence. We will continue our work in line with current and future challenges, taking into account the experience of modern armed conflicts. The President, who is also Chairman of the Collective Security Council, has instructed us to develop the aviation component of the organization's collective forces and to improve air defense capabilities within the CSTO framework. As colleagues have already said today, special attention is being paid to this. We will also continue developing the organization's peacekeeping forces, including by improving the legal and regulatory framework governing CSTO participation in UN peacekeeping operations. We would very much like to accelerate this work. Many years ago, Kazakhstan put forward the initiative to strengthen CSTO peacekeeping, and we actively supported it. The procedural issues that arose in the course of this work can and should be resolved as soon as possible. We are also paying close attention to strengthening cooperation in the field of international information security. The West is clearly trying to politicize this sphere and monopolize the right to determine what objective information is. Here, too, we see serious potential for expanded cooperation through the special services and other competent agencies. Information security is also being actively discussed at the UN. We are very interested in strengthening coordination at the United Nations on this track. Biological threats were also mentioned today. This, too, is among our priorities, including the use of the latest scientific achievements and medical technologies in the interests of ensuring biosecurity throughout the CSTO area. Within the Coordination Council on Biological Safety that we have created, we, as chair, will continue work on an important joint document devoted to analyzing and forecasting the biological situation within the organization's area of responsibility. I hope that this document will contain practical recommendations. We also intend to expand our instruments for jointly countering international terrorism and extremism, fighting terrorist financing, the laundering of criminal proceeds, drug trafficking, transnational organized crime, and illegal migration. Work has begun on a CSTO counterterrorism strategy through 2030. We hope that the heads of state will be able to approve it this year. We also highly value the role of interparliamentary cooperation. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the CSTO Parliamentary Assembly. The Parliamentary Assembly is carrying out important, systematic work to help create a unified legal space across the CSTO and to provide legislative support for the decisions adopted by the organization. The expected signing of the relevant agreement by the Parliamentary Assembly will undoubtedly open new opportunities for developing this dimension of CSTO activity and expanding the organization's external ties. This will help strengthen its authority. Experts from the Foreign Ministry are also actively involved in finalizing this project. On November 11th this year, the key CSTO event, the summit in Moscow, will take place. Our diplomatic colleagues from all participating countries will do everything necessary to prepare substantial documents for this summit that will contribute to the further development of our alliance. Thank you for your attention.